Hello, everybody. I'm Hugo Fernandez, professor of photography and fine arts in the humanities department, and I'm also the host of What's Going on LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. We've been listening to the LaGuardia Jazz Ensemble, and let's give them a nice little hand. And today I'm going to be serving as a moderator for questions and answers here for the president's briefing on his listening tour of LaGuardia College and all of the various staff and faculty and students. So just a quick housekeeping. You can see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. Feel free to type in your questions as the president speaks or afterwards, where we'll be answering some of these questions. We're going to try to get to as many as we can, and we're going to try to kind of morph a few of them together if they seem to be asking the same question. And I'll be handling that. Those questions that we do not get to, rest assured we will get back to you after the webinar. But without further ado, the president of LaGuardia Community College, President Kenneth Adams.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Good to see you this afternoon. Hi, everyone. I'm Kenneth Adams, president of LaGuardia Community College. Thank you all for joining me. In this presentation, I want to reflect on lessons that I learned on my listening tour and describe 5 strategic objectives that I have developed as a result of my conversations with many of you. You're going to see that for each one of these objectives, there are 3 initiatives. 3 kind of projects I'll devote myself to. So if you do the math, that's like saying 15 projects or initiatives that are really important to me and that I'm going to dive into as soon as this event is over and work on from now till the end of this school year. So first I want to show you a list of the many stops of my listening tour. There it is. Look at that, 43 of these group Zooms in just 11 weeks. So people talk about Zoom fatigue. Check with me later. Anyway, there's more to come. I'm not done, but big thanks to all of you who told me about your careers at LaGuardia, your successes, your concerns, and your hopes for the future of this really unique and special place. So what have I learned? Some of this may be evident to you, but let me share it like it's coming from me. Really clearly from me as a result of my tour and all those meetings with the folks in the groups in the slide you just saw. LaGuardia is blessed with an extraordinary faculty and staff. We've got a deep commitment to our students, and there's really a deep dedication to LaGuardia as a place, as an institution celebrating its 50th anniversary, and all around a sense of heartfelt loyalty. We have high quality academic programs, and really excellent student support services. LaGuardia has, and this is really important, especially with Middle States coming up, a culture of rigorous assessment and continuous improvement. There's a commitment at LaGuardia, a commitment to inclusion, to transparency, and to shared governance. And there's something quite unique, I think, across CUNY, and LaGuardia is known for this. It's its very special culture of innovation. And you can think of examples like the very unique, special data-driven IT solutions our IT team comes up with all the time. Really, the culture of innovation was evident to me on my tour in many, many aspects of LaGuardia, many different departments and areas of the college. And I'll come up, there'll be some examples later on about that. Now, I need to pause before I move on and make a point. Before I go any further with the presentation, and it's just one of the most important lessons of my listening tour. I am really impressed with teaching and learning at LaGuardia. And some of you may notice that for the most part, these 5 strategic objectives I'm about to describe, they're not focused on teaching and learning. And Paul noticed this when I gave him a sneak preview of this presentation earlier this week, and he called it to my attention. And Paul's right, but here's how I see it. Really you, the faculty, already do teaching and learning really well. I mean, here's an example. For 7 quarters in a row, the students in the LaGuardia nursing program have had a 100% first-time pass rate. That's the highest pass rate in all of CUNY. It's higher than the pass rate for the BSN programs at NYU and Pace. Nobody has a 100% pass rate. And no one does it 7 quarters in a row. I mean, that's what I mean about the excellence in teaching and learning that's already here at LaGuardia. So my focus, the contributions that I want to make to LaGuardia in this academic year are in areas like fundraising, campus climate, student support, and our obligation to serve Queens, as you're soon going to see. Along my tour, some of you asked me about the structure of my administration. I think we have a slide that shows the structure of our cabinet. This is the listing of the people that are in my current cabinet. There are actually 2 vacancies, 2 people we're going to add, and that's because we're doing a search right now for a new executive director of human resources, and we're doing a search for a new VP of ACE, adult and continuing education. So those 2 individuals will join the cabinet as soon as we bring them on board a college. There's another group that's really important, and this might be less obvious because it's brand new. We formed recently something called the President's Transition and Action Team. People in CUNY who love acronyms call it the PTAT. I just call it my transition team. Anyway, these 17 volunteers have agreed to help me with my transition by being kind of a sounding board, an ongoing advisory group. They're going to meet with me once a month under the leadership of their co-chairs, Robert Jaffe and Tamanika Smith, to help me roll out these 5 priorities I'm about to describe. All right, let's take a look. What are these? What are these priorities? The first is to increase enrollment. The second is to make sure we provide special support to LaGuardia students, faculty, and staff during COVID. The third is to build a more inclusive community. The fourth is to increase our fundraising. And the fifth is to support the economic recovery of Queens. So like I said, I'm going to outline all 5 of these and specifically give 3 examples or 3 initiatives for each of the priorities. So let's start with increasing enrollment. We have a slide to show where we were as of earlier this week. Let's take a moment to look at this. It may remind some of you of the enrollment slides that I showed back at opening sessions in my remarks there. The first column, the blue one, shows LaGuardia enrollment, FTE, which is full-time equivalent students, in 3 different measures. The first, the blue column, as I say, is the fall 20 target. That was what we were aiming for, my friends. The middle one, the black column in the middle, was our enrollment, our FTE enrollment in fall of 19. So that was taken on October 26, 19. So basically 1 year ago, 12,772 students. Unfortunately, the smallest column there, the one that's in red on the end, 11,595. That is our enrollment as of Tuesday, full-time equivalent enrollment at LaGuardia this Tuesday, 5,095. That's about 9% less than where we were a year ago. And it's well behind our target, which is what we need to hit to make our budget. There's a slight improvement, I should say, since my talk at opening sessions. You may recall our enrollment drop was even higher then on a percentage basis. So enrollment has picked up a little bit as we brought in students for fall 1. And of course, we're pushing away, being very aggressive, forging a way to drive enrollment for fall 2 and for spring 1, still in this fiscal year. We've got a lot of work to do, and you'll see in a moment, I'll talk about different strategies we're going to put in place. So when it comes to the things that I want to work on with respect to enrollment, let's take a look. I think we need to do 3 things: launch new advertising campaigns, strengthen our recruitment pipelines, and improve the student experience, improve customer service. First, let's look at this question of new ad campaigns. We need to focus on target markets, sub-markets of LaGuardia, of potential LaGuardia students that we know are out there. This is current high school students all across Queens, Brooklyn, and beyond. It's guidance counselors who are so influential in students' decision-making with respect to college. It's high school students that were not able to graduate because of COVID back in the spring of 2020, or maybe they did graduate, but because they didn't have a very good experience, imagine being a high school senior in New York City last spring, they haven't yet enrolled in college, but they're out there, and we need to find them and bring them to LaGuardia and prove that this can work and we can get it right. We've got to focus on adults, another very important market for us of students. Adults, older workers, people in need of new skills or more advanced skills so they can find a new job, get back into the New York City economy. We need to look for former LaGuardia students and just in general CUNY students who dropped out or stopped out and say, look, now's a good time to come back to LaGuardia and get back on your educational pathway. We've got to do more outreach to immigrants all across Queens who need to improve their English so they can get a new job. And we need to double down on looking for people recruiting students through our advertising who need a GED or other pre-college and prep programs like ESL so that they can get involved in other programs we have at the college. I mentioned advertising in languages other than English. This is really important, especially in Queens. We've got to, think about it. Queens is the most linguistically diverse urban area on the planet. That's a fact. You've heard it before. Something like 140 languages spoken throughout Queens. Some of the top languages in Queens, you know what they are: Spanish, Chinese, principally Mandarin, South Asian Indo-Aryan or Indic languages like Hindu Urdu, Bengali, Punjabi, Korean, Russian, Tagalog, or Filipino. The list goes on and on. We're going to design social media and other advertising campaigns in these languages to get to these communities in Queens and build awareness of all the great things LaGuardia has to offer. And of course, we've also got to make sure that back here, when someone's in an email chat or on the phone or responding to a text, that our staff is responding to students in their native languages. We need to do a better job coordinating our marketing initiatives. One thing I did notice on my tour, and this is true of many large organizations, is that things at LaGuardia can get kind of siloed. You know, by that I mean people do great work in one corner of the college, for example, in marketing, but it's not connected to other efforts that may be happening someplace else. So specifically, we need to make sure that our communications and marketing team is joined at the hip when it comes to advertising and recruiting for LaGuardia students with student affairs, right? VP Seals, Bart, and others who do the student outreach and recruitment, but also ACE, our continuing ed advertising. We can't have different organizations or different parts of LaGuardia promoting themselves as if they were their own independent little silos, not working in coordination with the whole college on coordinated advertising and marketing. So we're starting to work on that. We had some terrific meetings about that already last week. I mentioned strengthening recruitment pipelines. What's that look like? Three things. Increase the ACE to college enrollment pipeline. Very important connector. Adult and continuing ed at LaGuardia and other community colleges is often the front door. You know, it's the gateway, the connector between the community and the programs of a college. And we've got to really strengthen that pipeline. As I mentioned a moment ago in targeted advertising, we've got to do more outreach to adult learners. And for that older experienced worker that's looking to upskill, right? Learn new skills, get a degree, maybe finish the degree he or she never got originally and get back into the economy. We've got to offer them credit for prior learning. We've got to honor with academic credit their achievements in their jobs, the learning, the competencies they've already acquired. LaGuardia has some great folks working on this already, but we need to advertise that we do it. We have to promote it so that older workers know they don't have to start out seeking a 60 credit degree with no credits in their back pocket. No, we'll give them credit for prior work experience, for example, or military service. It's important to strengthen our partnerships with Queens community-based organizations. We have a great network, but Queens is huge. Let's face it, 2.4 million people, largest borough geographically in this city, thousands of wonderful organizations. We don't need thousands of partners, but we need dozens and dozens and dozens of Queens community-based organizations that become intermediaries for us, right? They help us to connect to the communities that our students live in or that our future students live in. So we need to strengthen those are pipelines too, partnerships that we have to strengthen. When I say improving the student experience or customer service, I need to pause on this one for a second. You know, in one of the most important events in my listening tour was the opening sessions jam held back on September 10th. And there were more than 1,800 comments posted via Yammer in the jam, in those various chat rooms that were moderated by the volunteers that put opening sessions together and that explored all kinds of really important topics about LaGuardia. So I've gone through that several times. It's an amazing collection of comments, but guess what? I saw something really interesting. I saw somebody, I think a faculty member, who pushed back on the idea of talking about customer service in a college setting. And someone else wrote back as a response, no, you know what the difference is? She said, when a student is in a classroom, When a person's in a classroom, that's a student. But when that student is at the bursar's office or going to financial aid or the registrar, that's a customer. And we have to overwhelm that student with awesome customer service in those business-like transactions. And I think that's right. I think it's an important distinction to make. So here's what matters. We've got to assist students with dignity and efficiency through these complex and intimidating enrollment procedures. I mean, maybe it seems simple to you now, but for a first-time person coming to LaGuardia, coming to CUNY, just to enroll in college, maybe they've never been to college before, maybe no one in their household has, it's daunting. The FAFSA form, all the other paperwork, all the other rules or regulations, it's an intimidating process. It's not our fault, but we have to have that awesome customer service to walk students through it and make sure it's easy for them and student friendly. We've got to be sure we fix the leaky pipe. What do I mean by that? Let's face it, we've got breakdowns in the continuum of student contact and support. I discovered some of these myself because when early on, I've got this website and my name's on the website, students would reach out to me and tell me if they were having problems. I call them right up. I talk to them, what's going on? So I found out early on, there are leaks in our pipe, right? We've got leaks we've got to fix. So there's a continuum of student contact and support that's flawless and nobody falls through the cracks. Part of this, by the way, is increasing staffing in the SIC, the Student Information Center, where a very small group of people do an amazing job at constant outreach to students. All right, let's move on to my second priority. Provide special support to LaGuardia students, faculty, and staff during COVID. And this is important because we already do a good job under normal conditions, providing support to our students and our staff. But with COVID, we've got to double down and do more. We know that. We're doing it already. Again, I'm making this commitment to make sure we continue to provide this support. And here are 3 specific things I want to do. We've got to lower advising caseloads, increase emergency aid, and provide additional online support and resources. Let's take a look at advising for a minute. In this next slide, look at the disparity at advising caseloads by program. For example, that first one, College Discovery, look at the ratio. 1 advisor serves 80 students. In ASAP, and this is the CUNY standard across the system for ASAP, 1 advisor, 150 students. Okay, what about everybody else? Over 9,000 LaGuardia students are in an advising caseload of 1 to 525. That's to say 1 advisor trying to provide support to 525 students. Are those students getting the same level of attention as a student in College Discovery? I think not. I will work with Vice President Nyrita Seals and her team to lower these advising caseloads. We're going to have to look at reassigning existing staff, especially looking at people who hopefully will volunteer to work in advising while they may be in other areas currently. We're not going to increase the advising workload of faculty. Faculty do a lot of advising already. This is not about asking faculty to step up and do more advising. No, this is about looking at our existing advising staffing and resources and potentially looking at the possibility of reassigning certain staff to beef up the advising, to reduce the advising caseload or beef up advising support to students, however you want to define it. Let's look at providing additional online support and resources. So what does he mean by that? This is really important too, again, because of the unique conditions and challenges posed by COVID. We have to increase the services of our wellness center. And fortunately, we should be able to do that in short order because the CUNY Central Office just gave us funding from the CARES Act, specifically for increasing mental health counseling for students. So we're working on that. VP Seals is working on that as we speak. She's also committed to work with me to increase the use of peer mentors. And of course, we want to increase emergency aid thanks to the support that we get from the LaGuardia Foundation. The third strategic priority, and this is something I reflected on, as some of you may recall, back at the opening sessions, my remarks then in September. And it's the goal of building a more inclusive community. Three basic steps, again, initiatives I'm working on that I commit to. We're going to draft a social equity plan. I want to create a new position to lead our DEI initiatives. And I believe we need to implement training for leadership, starting with me, our cabinet, okay, the leadership of the college, training for leadership, faculty, staff, and students to reduce bias. Now, here's something really incredible. Look at all these groups that are working to build a more inclusive LaGuardia already. Many of you are involved in them. I mean, there's 17 on this slide. I've never seen such a great set of organizations. I mean, these are terrific groups, committees, and others that are working toward this important goal. For all of you who volunteer your time and energy for this work, LaGuardia thanks you. Thank you so much. And this is, by the way, I should say, as I looked at the slide earlier, I fear we may have left a couple groups out, so I apologize in advance. But this just gives you a sampling of all the great work going on by different groups who care about a more inclusive LaGuardia. As part of this priority, we need to draft a social equity plan. That's a blueprint for establishing a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community. It's a document that lays out our vision, mission, objectives, strategies, action, and yes, evaluation of our work as we move towards this goal. Now, to lead and coordinate the work and activities that will build a more inclusive community, I want to create a new position in our college, a Director of Diversity and Inclusion. This person will report to me and serve in my cabinet. Well, okay, a note of caution. I know, I've been told there's a hiring freeze. It's not easy to create new positions in CUNY right now because of our deficit and overall financial challenges, and that is true. I do need to get this position approved by the CUNY central office. But Shahir and our HR team and I are already working on that, and I'm going to push really hard to create this position. Now, it's not in the slides here, but there are two metrics we need to pay more attention to and improve on. The first is what I call the achievement gap between underrepresented minority students and all of our other students. You know, in CUNY, in the CUNY system, that's called URM, underrepresented minority. It's a statistical measure that they use. And to CUNY, URM means Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Alaskan. For our purposes, let's say Black and Hispanic. So the measure of that achievement gap in CUNY is done this way. It's not perfect, but it's what the central office uses. We look at the 1-year retention rate of first-time freshmen. So again, to look at that achievement gap at LaGuardia, we would compare the 1-year retention rate of first-time freshmen who are Black and Hispanic against the 1-year retention rate of all of our other students. If you look at that gap over the last 5 years, the average is 10.5%, right? A 10.5% gap in achievement between our Black and Hispanic LaGuardia students and all of our other students. You know, that's actually interesting. It's actually the community college average in CUNY 10.5. It's the senior college average in CUNY 10.5. So guess what? LaGuardia is right there at the average with respect to this measure of an achievement gap between Black and Hispanic students and everybody else. Well, guess what, my friends? I don't believe after my 2 months here and this listening tour that LaGuardia is an average place. We cannot live with average. We can and should do better. Second metric, percent of full-time faculty of color. All right, who knows? Let me ask you, you're all watching this. Fall 19, what percentage of our faculty was faculty of color? Raise your hand, I'll call on you. I can't hear you, so I'll give you the answer, 43%, too low. 43% full-time faculty, fall 19 of LaGuardia, faculty are people of color. We've got to do a better job. I say let's put that goal at 50%, at least 50%. People have told me already, how are you going to do that when there's a hiring freeze? We can't hire new faculty. It's going to be hard. It's okay. It's a stretch goal, but it's one we have to put out there and really work hard to achieve. Now, here's something else that we need to, that's really important if we want to create a truly inclusive community. And again, I want to credit Opening Sessions for this recommendation because it came out several times in several of the different JAM panels. We have to be sure we include people with disabilities in all of these discussions about inclusion and in all of this work to make LaGuardia a more inclusive community. An inclusive LaGuardia means everybody feels valued. Everyone is family. Finally, got to remind you, mark your calendars for the week of November 16th, coming up. Second annual Week of Diversity and Inclusion here at LaGuardia. There are going to be some great events, meetings, and activities in that week, our Week of Diversity and Inclusion. Keep an eye out, please, in your emails for invitations and announcements of those events. Let's move to my fourth strategic priority, increase fundraising. We've got to centralize and coordinate our development functions, increase support from the foundation, and get strategic in the pursuit of new government and foundation grants. Let me spend a little time on this. One of the things I realized in my tour was that development efforts at LaGuardia tend to be scattered or fragmented around the college in various silos. Individual activity can be really good, but it's not coordinated across the college. And we have to be more coordinated, and we have to be strategic. In this economy and with the challenges before us, my friends, we cannot afford to leave money on the table. Second, when I mentioned support from the foundation, I have to, another sort of aside. When I realized what was going on with our foundation, its capacity for raising money, its leadership under Susie Scanlon, tremendous board of directors, lots of staff support, I realized we had an asset that doesn't exist anywhere else in CUNY, at least at the community college level. The sophistication of the foundation and the who's who of civic-minded, generous New Yorkers who are so supportive of our students. I've never seen that before. And if you look at it, and I did, in thinking about this talk, I look back at the financial records of the foundation from fiscal year 2016 through 2020, through last June. And do you know, our foundation raised $2.9 million on average for each one of those 5 years. That's like $3 million a year from individual gifts of generous New Yorkers, all brought in, all secured by the foundation. Now that's going to scholarships for LaGuardia students who need last dollar financial aid. It's going to emergency student aid, helping students make a rent payment so they don't get evicted, become homeless, helping students get food, helping students get business attire because they've got a job interview, probably secured for them by the foundation, by the way, helping students get Metro cards. Put that $3 million per year in personal real terms. Think about it this way. That's like saying $500 in emergency financial assistance for 6,000 students a year, almost half our student population. Come on, it's amazing. It's like saying $1,000 in the pocket of 3,000 students if they had a serious need and need $1,000. I mean, that doesn't happen anywhere else. Trust me, it's amazing. So the gratitude I have, and I suspect most of you have, as you learn about this, right, to that foundation. It's a group of caring volunteers who really want to help our students. My gratitude is profound. And I'm working with the foundation, as you can imagine, to raise the goal and raise more than $3,000 this year. $3 million this year. We also have to aggressively pursue government and foundation grants to support our students, but also to support our faculty and staff. There are lots of, believe it or not, even in this economy, there are federal funding opportunities that we're missing from the National Science Foundation, from the Department of Energy, from HSS, Health and Human Services. We've got to do a better job tracking all those opportunities and connecting them to faculty and staff. That's just on the federal side. State and city finances are a little rocky, as we know, but you still have to turn over every stone and look for grant opportunities, foundation, corporate, individuals, as much as we can, as aggressively as we can. Finally, there's a series of foundations, increasingly, right, that view America's 1,100 community colleges as the most important institutions when it comes to addressing income inequality. They're looking at community colleges at a national level, and they're funding innovations in community colleges that connect, for example, low-income people, new immigrants, others with obstacles to a traditional educational pathway, to community colleges to get them on an educational pathway and into a degree program, ultimately a baccalaureate degree, and a job and a career in something that they care about, right? And so these foundations are looking at this and they're looking for innovation and they're funding it. And we are that place. We do that work and we have all that innovation. So we just got to connect the dots, be strategic, and pursue more grant support for LaGuardia. And again, this is one of the things I'm committing myself to working on this year. Number 5. This is the final priority or strategic priority I'm laying out for you for this year for me that I'm going to focus on. Support the economic recovery of Queens. Again, this concept in a way came from the opening sessions jam because a lot of people in those various chat groups talked about connecting to Queens, talked about partnerships with community-based organizations, as I mentioned, for example, for the purposes of student recruitment, but also for the purposes of community service, also the purpose of getting out there and connecting to the communities of Queens that we support. All these comments reminded me about the second word in our institution's name, community. We got to remember that. Anyway, I feel strongly that ACE, our Division of Adult and Continuing Education, should lead the way for LaGuardia in fulfilling this objective. Like I said before, they're our front door to the Queens community. But first, we need to reckon with the impact of COVID on our ACE division. Frankly, we need to work at ACE. We need to rebuild ACE. Let me show you what's going on at ACE. We've got some challenges. This, my friends, I'm sorry to say, there's no better way to say it. This is an ugly chart. This is a chart that illustrates a financial race to the bottom. Not pretty. Orange line, that's expenses. Blue line, revenue. What do you notice? Right, they're backwards. The blue line should be on top, right? And the expense line, the orange line should be underneath. And then you'd always have more revenue than expenses. But this situation here, as you can see, is unfortunately the reverse. What do you notice about this too? It goes back to 2017. Think about that. We have been running a deficit in ACE since 2017. And you can see it wasn't huge that year because the two lines are relatively close together, 7 million to 6,500,000. So you have about a $600,000 deficit that year, which is 10%, by the way, not healthy. But boy, did it balloon in 2008. They call that, economists would call that a Jaws chart. And then it proceeds, as you see, along that path, 2009, huge excess of expenses over revenue. By the way, remember, what's the LaGuardia revenue at ACE? It's tuition and fees, right? That students pay for their programs, adult ed, workforce training, and so on. And then, unfortunately, you see the steep decline, which is because of dropping enrollment. So both our expenses start to drop, but the revenue is dropping at a very similar rate to where we are today. So how do you look? What do you get from this chart? And I'm, take some time. I don't want to rush through this one because this may be new information for some of you, because it tracks back, as I say, over 5 years. We got a couple things going on. Running a deficit for the past 5 years, not good. A simultaneous deep decline in revenue, things are moving in the wrong direction. Third problem, not on the chart, the reserves, accountants call that the fund balance, that had been saved up from many profitable years in ACE, at this point have been fully depleted. So there are no reserves to tap into to cover a deficit. And we just can't blame all this on COVID because look when the problem started. Remember, ACE, because it has to be self-funding, should be run like a business with all the fiscal discipline required of a successful business, starting with don't spend more than you're bringing in. Now, making matters worse is true. This year, COVID has had a big impact on ACE. Normally, fall term enrollment, this time of year in ACE, for these tuition and free programs, normal conditions, we were averaging about 3,200 students in the fall term. Today, this fall, 1,200 students. You do the math. Moving forward, we've got to align ACE programs, new programs, to meet the needs of Queens residents impacted by COVID. That's what I mean, turning and face Queens, help Queens residents get the training they need, non-credit workforce training in this case, to get back on their feet as quickly as possible to a family-sustaining job in a post-COVID New York City economy. We've got to provide scholarships to cover tuition for those workforce training programs. This is very tricky. And again, I'm circling this. This is something I'm really going to work on this year. And it's a long-term challenge. Remember, everybody, there's no TAP or Pell for a non-credit training program. There's no financial aid for people who are just, want to become a phlebotomist or an EMT for that matter. So we've got to, and so when to cover instructional costs, we would have to price those programs at levels that Queens residents who've lost their jobs because of COVID and can barely pay the rent, they can't afford. We have to come up with a sort of financial aid mechanism or scholarships to help low income Queens residents who need job training come to LaGuardia and get it, and then help them get a good job and get back on their feet. And the third is offer training for new industry certifications. This is important as we turn and face a post-COVID New York City economy. What kind of certifications will people need to work in healthcare? What about IT and other sectors that are either already growing and recovering or poised for growth? What kind of industry-driven micro-credentials can we link to our AAS degree programs? For example, in data analytics, I was part of a terrific event that Asanta and Hannah invited me to the other day, actually earlier this week. It's a celebration Monday night, 75 students, not LaGuardia students, these are workforce students, A students. These are all men and women who work for the city in H&H, the Health and Hospitals, which is the network of public city hospitals, right? So they all have kind of entry-level jobs in New York City hospitals. They came to LaGuardia for this very difficult, I think it's like 1,000 hours, very difficult, rigorous program in data analytics, and they all passed and have this new industry recognized credential in data analytics. Back at H&H, we've been talking to the HR departments of the hospital system so that these students now with this credential get promotions. And with that credential, they get a promotion, get a better wage. As I like to say, that means more money in their pocket and food on the table back home. So making sure that we identify the emerging credentials required by New York City employers and help Queens residents earn them, incumbent workers like the hospital employees I just mentioned earn them, and our LaGuardia students earn them and add them to their degree. It's like adding it to your portfolio, adding it to your resume. So when you do leave with your associate's degree, you're a much more competitive candidate for a job in the New York City economy. All right, let's wrap up. If we just one more time, let me remind you what I'm committing to. These are my priorities for this academic year, now through the end of June. Increase enrollment, provide special support to LaGuardia students, faculty, and staff during COVID, build a more inclusive community, increase fundraising, and support the economic recovery of Queens. Thank you to all of you who spoke with me at one of the many stops on my listening tour. It's a lot of people. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you, well, in advance, that I haven't had a chance to meet, but I look forward to meeting you soon because this listening tour of mine is not over. We've got more stops coming up, and I'd always like to say that if for some reason I haven't had my meeting with you or your department, your group, your unit, and I should, let me know and let's schedule it because I really want to reach out to all of you. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to come back and provide updates about how I'm doing with this at opening sessions for the spring semester. And again, at the end of the year, let's say in June of 2021, because I really believe these are 5 priorities. These are my strategic priorities that come out of my listening tour. You've seen if you add them up, the 15 initiatives I'm taking on. And I say, hold me accountable, check in on me, ask me how am I doing on this, right? And you know, the other way to think about it is you deserve to know what your president is up to. Like, let's say you go to get your teeth cleaned, you're sitting in the dentist chair and you're thinking to yourself, I wonder what President Adams is doing today to help LaGuardia. Oh yeah, and you have that list of these 15 things I'm doing in your back pocket. You ask the dentist for a moment, you reach over, you pull the list out. That's what he is. He's working on these 15 initiatives from those 5 strategic priorities he talked about on October 29th when he finished his listening tour. So that's what I'm up to. That's what I'm doing for LaGuardia. Hold me accountable. Heartfelt thanks to the communications team that helped me put this presentation together this afternoon. You know who they are. Round of applause for Gina Taraskevich, William Kelly, Cindy Bush, of course, Robert Jaffe, who helps me with everything. Professor Hugo Fernandez, who's going to monitor the Q&A that we're about to go into. Big shout out to our colleagues in IT who make all of these online events possible. Let's remember, in our online LaGuardia, we couldn't do it without everybody in IT. And I want to also do a special shout out to the sign language interpreters who've been helping me this afternoon. That's Elizabeth Lauria and Jennifer Ward. And by extension to the faculty and staff of the LaGuardia Program for Deaf Adults and John Collins, who's the Program Director for Deaf Studies. Thanks all very much. And let's turn it over to Hugo, who's going to moderate the Q&A.
Okay, a lot to chew on there. And we've got quite a few questions. Some of them are very specific. And so I'm going to start with a kind of a general question, which touches on one of the first ones that came in concerning the CUNY closing and possible reopening. But I'll couch it this way because it maybe fits into a lot of these issues that you were talking about is what is spring 2021 going to look like at LaGuardia? As far as reopenings, but also possibly you could touch on some of the initiatives which you see, hitting the ground and running with.
Hugo, thank you. And thanks to whoever, put that question into the Q&A.
Mercedes Floor, actually.
All right, Mercedes. Thank you, Mercedes. So first thing I'd say is, in many respects, my prediction is that spring 21, this upcoming spring semester is going to be very much like this one. In fact, on Monday night, the CUNY Board of Trustees met and voted to approve the continuation of online instruction for all our classes and programs across CUNY for the upcoming semester. So we're going to have another semester online. We're going to have another semester where we're going to, as far as we can tell now, need to severely limit the number of people that go to campus. And Hugo, we're down now. This last week, we keep a daily tally, of course, everyone on campus, and we look at averages, and we were down to about 150 people on average, on an average day last week on campus. That's it, out of a community of 16, 17,000 people. So that's a minimal presence on campus, and we're going to stick to that for as long as we need to ensure the health and safety of everybody in this community and their families and friends. So part one is imagine spring kind of like this semester right now until further notice. Something that I think is going to change, though, I just want to touch on this briefly. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm getting more and more confident that there's going to be a vaccine for COVID pretty soon. And I think if we get something, it at least begins to roll out early in the new year in terms of vaccine, that's going to change how we feel about stuff. At least it will for me. And eventually when a vaccine comes and more of us can get out and about and we can get back to campus, it isn't just like the physical thing about not being at home and working from work. It's how you feel when you see some like sunshine coming over the horizon, some hope that a vaccine is going to give. And why am I bullish on a vaccine? I mean, think about it this way. There's something like 136 vaccines in development right now worldwide by research organizations, pharmaceutical companies. 48 are already in phase 1 and phase 2 testing. I mean, think about the numbers here, because you don't need 48 vaccines to work. 11 are in phase 3, right, which is the final phase of clinical trials of a drug, large scale, 30, 40,000 people, testing for efficacy and side effects. And some of these 11 vaccines, that testing is going to be done in November, December, like by Christmas. So there's a lot of work going on here. And if you think of, the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is looking very promising. That's one of the biggest ones. They're ready to make 1.3 billion doses of that vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, Merck, I kind of follow this. I'm interested in it. So the point here is that I am pretty confident there's going to be a lot of progress made on a vaccine, and we're going to see that in the new year. And I think that that's going to give us hope, and that's going to change how we feel about things, not just sort of where we're working. Let's go to another question, Hugo.
Okay, and by the way, I just want to remind folks that the bottom of the screen is the Q&A section where you can type in your questions. Okay, there's a lot of folks actually with ideas that have been triggered by what you've been discussing, particularly around enrollment and advisement and other ideas. Through your listening tour, are there particular surprises or things, things that happened that were unexpected? Because it seems like, particularly since you are going to continue the listening tour, there's a lot of folks that want to talk to you. There's a lot of folks that want to get your ear and have ideas.
Well, first of all, to all of you, thank you. I'm encouraged that you want to share your ideas with me. So do that. Send me an email. If I don't get back to you immediately, it's because I've got a lot of emails and from lots of folks, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So don't be shy. You can also go to Robert Jaffe. You can go to Jessica Mendoza, my assistant, however you need to get to me. Just get me an email. It'll find its way to me and I'll take a look at it. And where it makes sense to have a follow-up conversation, we should definitely do that. But you asked about, some surprises or, discoveries along the way. stuff that's not in my PowerPoint, Hugo. And it's almost like there's too much. It's been so exciting and it's almost too much to note, but I'll throw out a couple things that are standouts for me. The LaGuardia and Wagner archives. I mean, I had no idea before coming to LaGuardia, and shame on me that such an amazing resource existed and did what it did. You know, the work over the years done in our math, engineering, computer science department around developmental math. So it turns out not only does LaGuardia do really well in developmental math and getting our students at a high rate through Gateway math courses, it's like a model for the rest of the CUNY Community College system. I mean, so amazing. This is another example of this culture of innovation, of people at LaGuardia just taking the initiative, working together with great groups of smart people, taking the initiative and solving problems, coming up with solutions to become models for CUNY and then frankly for community colleges around the country. You know, and personally, I just met some amazing people. I've had some really interesting discussions. This is dangerous now because I'm naming names, but with John Chaney, for example, on LaGuardia and educational services for people who are formerly incarcerated, or programs for people at the Queensborough Correctional Facility, which is right across the street from us, obviously. So John is like, I actually have his book now and I'm reading a lot of his stuff. You know, the poetry of Carrie Connors is amazing. I mean, you know, your photography is pretty impressive, my friend. So there's just an amazing amount of creativity, amazing amount of great work. And that's been a very kind of joyful part of my learning journey.
All right. There's a lot going on as far as you've piqued people's interest on data. So I guess that's part of some of the questions you're going to answer back after this. And by the way, we had scheduled to end at 4:30. We have to check with our folks if that's still our goal. Wanted to talk a minute about the Queens community again. So the greater community. Do you want to talk a little? You come from a background of economics in the state, and you know, so given what Queens is facing, what do you think lies ahead?
Now, this is a tough one, Hugo. I mean, I think that what lies ahead is sort of an uneven economic recovery. New York as a place is in a very tough spot. You know, we were hammered economically by COVID more than other cities around the country. And our bounce back so far as a city has been less than the recovery of other places. You know, New York City unemployment today is about 14%. Back in July, Queens unemployment was 20.5%. And the problem is, for so many Queens residents, the industries that suffered the greatest job losses, well, those were industries that employed our friends and neighbors and our students' parents and friends. Restaurants, hotels, the arts, transportation, building services are the sectors most hammered. And you know, New York City as a whole is down 600,000 jobs this fall compared to the jobs we had last fall when we had very low unemployment. It's like, no, we lost more jobs because of COVID, right? It was worse in the summer and jobs are slowly coming back, but we're still off by 600,000 jobs. And many of them, again, service industry jobs in hospitality, tourism, and retail. So when I say uneven recovery, what that means is there's certain parts of what is fortunately a very diverse economy in New York and in Queens that are bouncing back. And some never suffered that much. Employment in the tech sector is going strong. In financial services, it's still quite strong. But you know, Queens employs a lot of people in transportation and logistics because it's home to the airports. Well, you know what's happening at the airports, not much, right? Not a lot of activity. So those jobs come back more slowly. I go back to the importance of a vaccine. So when there's a vaccine and it starts getting widely distributed, and again, the first vaccine will probably go to the first 10 million people will be frontline workers at a national level. So, you know, Hugo, you and I, we don't get that first vaccine. But eventually, as the vaccine rolls out, it's going to stimulate all sorts of pent-up economic activity for the city. Once there's a vaccine, people start to travel. Once you can go back to a Broadway show, that feeds all kinds of economic activity across the city. Once people go back to work in the offices in Midtown Manhattan, et cetera. So when I say uneven economic recovery. What we're looking at for Queens is that sectors of the Queens economy will recover at different rates, some faster, some slower. We've just got to do our best at LaGuardia to understand where the jobs are coming and what employers need from our graduates, whether they're coming out of an ACE program or a college degree program, what the competencies are required, what kind of educational environment is required for those employers to put people back to work. And again, it's just not a simple answer. I apologize. We are going to recover. Certain sectors will bounce back, especially when a vaccine is widely available, and others will lag. But in the end, there's so much pent-up demand in a very big, powerful, and diverse economy, the economic capital of this country. So New York will come back strong. It'll come back really strong.
Oh, I want to touch on, because we do have a student who put in a question, and to not quote it specifically, happens to be a philosophy student. It speaks to the diversity question and bias and all of these things that you touched on, but in the greater community, specifically what's been happening across the country with people's opinions of police behavior. And as an institution, how do you see us responding to this greater issue of institutional racism and things like that throughout the country? Does this touch on these pieces around, for example, faculty of color increasing the percentages, but that's one way to address it. But do you see other ways the college can do this? And that comes from Richard Rendon, by the way.
Yeah, Richard, no, thanks for the question. Really important. I think a lot of this stuff does start at home. So I think it's really important, Hugo and Richard, that we make sure we are ourselves at LaGuardia, a community that embraces everybody, and where everybody feels welcome and valued and respected. And then that we go forward in the world and have that expectation of the people in the communities where we live and work, and of our elected officials and of the broader society in which we live. I think that's just a very important thing for us to do, is to do what's right and then model that behavior and frankly expect it of others in the communities around us and in the broader society. And when we observe something going in the wrong direction, call it out, right? And use, frankly, the benefits of a LaGuardia education in excellent reading and writing and communication and thoughtfulness and articulateness. Let's use all of those as we communicate the importance of these issues with other people. This brings me back to the value of a liberal arts education. LaGuardia is noted for having something like a quarter of its students in STEM majors, actually more like 28%, which is the highest level in CUNY or in community colleges of STEM majors. But guess what? Our liberal arts programs, our humanities programs are fundamental. Students develop that capacity to understand and analyze these social problems and then go forward and advocate for their reform. And with those communication skills and critical thinking skills that are required to advocate for change, to build the society that we all want. So LaGuardia has the potential to do this. It's already doing it, and we need to turn up the volume.
Just to let folks know, we're going to go to 4:40, so you feel free to continue to type in some questions. A couple of pieces. One is, it seems like folks are actually excited about the customer service initiative and are actually asking for training in that area. And you are also speaking about the bias trainings and things like that. So I don't know if you would like to speak to that aspect of what you see the future for training opportunities for the staff to address both of these issues. And I believe that, I guess I was looking for, well, let's tackle that one, and I'll give you another one, because we got about 2 or 3 more questions we could do.
No, here's what we need to do.
Here it is. They're saying that though they know that you're hot to raise money, that get your fundraising, what else do you see being hands-on as far as in these initiatives, getting in there and getting dirty with the question?
Well, these are initiatives where I'm basically, and for most of them, I'm sort of going to lead the charge. It doesn't mean I'm going to do every ounce of the work. I've been talking to VP SEALs about things like, improving the advising caseload. And so part of agreeing we're going to do that together and me supporting her so that she can pull it off, right? Like these are initiatives. Some of them are partnerships between me and members of the cabinet and other leaders of the college. And some are more, I'll give you an example. I talk a lot about silo busting, Hugo, which is looking across LaGuardia and seeing things that could be fragmented or distributed around the college and not coordinated, like development work. So I myself am taking that on, where I'm talking to all the people in that area and bringing them together and developing those strategies. And yes, rolling up my sleeves to work on that. Same is true of advertising. Same is true of some of the areas working with VP SEALs and student support. So I guess of the 15 initiatives, on some, I'm really rolling up my sleeves and doing a lot of the work myself. In others, I'm doing it in collaboration with partners across the college. But again, I'm saying, hold me accountable, right? Like I'm committed to this stuff.
Okay, so I'm going through some of the questions, and I'll tell you some of the things that have certainly piqued folks' interest. The ACE, of course, how we go about, making ACE. I guess in this case, you'd have to say not necessarily profitable, but at least economically sound. That's one piece of it. Again, folks are very giving you shout outs as far as reducing this advising ratio and pieces like that, and have their own ideas. And then the third one that seems to come up is the HVAC system. And I guess people have a lot of concerns about, again, going back to this idea of what, not necessarily since it won't happen at Spring One, but eventually when we do return to the campus. So which one would you like to tackle?
Let me go backwards. Mindful of the time. On the HVAC system, Shahir Irfan, our VP for Administration and Finance, and I talk about this a lot. It's also something Paul Arcario has mentioned frequently. The good news is we are now doing a whole boiler replacement project. This gets a little bit into the weeds, I'm afraid, and replacing an antiquated steam heating system with a high pressure hot water heating system. And we got the contractor to change the filtration system in the air handling unit, right? So we're going to go from the rack of old filters are being thrown out, and all new filters, the highest level, especially with COVID, right, of filtering capacity that's always recommended. That contractor, this was a thing we added on to the job, right? They haven't done it yet because they're on back order because everyone wants these filters and they're not making them fast enough. But we have an order placed for these super filtering filters. It's on back order. When that order arrives, our contractors are going to place them in the rack where we had the old filters that were not quite as good. So we are mindful of this. We're replacing filters as we do these jobs. And we're being very careful about, at least right now, of course, under the COVID conditions, about any room that anybody's in terms of ventilation, cleanliness. It's very, very rigorously, maintained. But long term, yeah, we're working on the filters. I got to go backwards to the question prior to the filters, Hugo. I want to do the customer service one. I love that question. And I don't know how to, I want to talk to folks in ACE, because it would be great if we could get some basic customer service training curriculum, in ACE. It's a simple program, not too many hours, not too expensive, and have people who work on the staff of the college that are interested sign up for it. Like, I got to find a way for us to pay for it. I got that. But I think it would be great to have customer service training available for members of the LaGuardia community that wanted to kind of up their game when it comes to customer service. Help me, Hugo. You had another question in that bundle of final questions.
Yeah, right. So the ratio for advisors, people are very supportive of that idea, and I guess have some of their own ideas, including utilizing students. Our student success mentors is possibly helping with that load.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you wanted to touch upon that again.
I think those are great ideas. And look, a lot of you may be saying, hey, he, in his speech this afternoon, one of my ideas from opening sessions. Absolutely. I paid really close attention. Remember, this was a listening tour.
Very little I've described is stuff that I've just pulled out of thin air. I think nothing is stuff I pulled out of thin air. All of these initiatives, the stuff I care about is what I've learned on this tour, thanks to input from you, including many of you who put really thoughtful comments in the chats of the Yammer, on Yammer in the Jam. So for example, there were a lot of comments there about advising caseloads. You know what else was in there, Hugo? I picked up on this one. I didn't mention it today. We've got to do a better job making sure students understand all the services available to them. Remember a moment ago, I talked about special support from the foundation. You know, if a student has a problem paying a rent bill, we can help with that. We've got to make sure students know that. We can't just talk about it here on a Thursday afternoon. Same goes for faculty and staff. We got to make sure faculty and staff, and it's on us, right? It's not on them. We've got to inform them of all of these services so they have this stuff at their fingertips if they run into a situation with a student with a challenge, with a problem. So we've got to do a better job of that. I picked up on that too on my tour, and it's something I care about.
Just to correct the record, actually, and the question had come from Cynthia Casey. She's actually interested in helping students get training in HVAC, I guess installations, which looks like a promising field. So that might be an answer for ACE as well, to get ACE into that place of matching expense with income.
So for Cynthia needs to know, and it's not fully baked, so I didn't want to mention it because she asked and running out of time. I have a friend at Pratt Institute over in Brooklyn who runs a program at Pratt for many years in cooperation with City Tech for facilities management. And there's an international trade association called IFMA, International Facilities Management Association. I introduced Paul and others at LaGuardia to my friend Regina Cahill from Pratt, and we are exploring the idea of some type of, and it could start in ACE as non-credit, but a facility management training program at LaGuardia. It doesn't exist in CUNY. The program at New York City Tech is totally different. And this trade association, a global association of people who work in facilities management, is asking us to consider doing it. And guess what it would include? HVAC, okay? So we're getting there, we're working on it.
My colleague, Joyce Rubin, has a question, which is actually a question that we would have gotten with or without the pandemic, and it's about space. I'm sure during your listening tour, I know you said this, that everybody wants more space. So I don't know if you've got anything in the hopper for that. We've got about a minute left. Obviously, we can get back to Joyce after, and all these questions are going to be answered, I think, specifically afterwards. Am I correct?
Yeah, no, we'll get back to it. So my apologies. Apologies to people whose questions we couldn't get to. We will get back to you individually through email or whatever. Joyce, thank you for the question. I am aware of the constraints. I think C building has so much potential, but we need to win the lottery so we can finish renovating it.
And I think we're out of time. We're at 4:40, which we extended it an extra 10 minutes. Folks will get their questions answered. I want to thank you, President Adams, for listening to us, for doing this tour. Second, for getting back to us and sharing what you've found. I hope there are going to be more of these occasions. Certainly you can utilize the radio station as a resource. I'm still waiting for you to come on my show for that interview. Hint, hint. And I also want to just thank all the folks in marketing communications who let me be a part of this. Thanks to everybody who's listened and asked questions, and I'll let you have the last word.
Well, Hugo, thanks for moderating the chat and helping us with this portion of the program. And one more time, big shout out, big thanks to all of you who took the time to meet with me, took time out of your busy schedules to share your views, opinions, stories, devotion to LaGuardia with me. And for all of you who I haven't had a chance to meet yet, we'll get together one of these days and this tour of mine will continue. But I did want to pause, at this point of this tour after 2 months and say, look, here's what I've heard. Here's what I think I myself, it's the difference I want to make. Here's where I want to help. Here are the initiatives I want to take on, at least this year. More to come in the new year. And of course, more to come in the coming weeks and months. And yeah, let's tell me when I could go on the show. I'd be happy to go on your radio show anytime, Hugo. So we'll figure that out.
Yes, Dr. Riccio will be in touch with Jessica Mendoza, and we'll make that happen.
We'll make it happen. We'll make it happen. And everybody else, thanks for tuning in to this event, and have a wonderful afternoon and terrific weekend. Happy Halloween.